On August 14, 2005, a strange and terrifying guest was hovering over the skies of Athens, the capital of Greece. About 10,000 meters above the ground, a passenger plane was silently circling without communicating with anyone. The horrifying part was that for the last 2 hours, this plane had not responded to any messages from control towers. Fear spread through the air of Athens. Was this the preparation for a terrorist attack or a hijacking event? Because of this fear, the Greek Air Force immediately sent its fighter jets to pursue it. When the fighter jets got close to the plane, they saw a shocking scene inside. It turned out that the plane was completely silent. No movement, no sound. All passengers were sitting lifeless in their seats, and even the cockpit was empty. During this time, the F-16 pilots saw a man in the cockpit who didn't look like a pilot. He was moving around as if he was searching for something, or trying to understand the situation. The next moment, the plane suddenly tilted to one side and began descending rapidly toward the ground. Within minutes, it crashed into the mountains north of Athens. In this crash, all 121 passengers and crew members lost their lives. But what exactly had happened? Why was there no movement inside the plane? Why weren't the pilots and crew responding to any calls? And what happened after takeoff that turned this flight into a horrifying tragedy? This is the story of Helios Flight 52, also known as the ghost plane. Welcome once again. On the morning of August 14, 2005, at Larnaca Airport in Cyprus, 115 passengers and 6 crew members boarded Helios Flight 52. Their destination was Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic. But they had to make a stopover in Athens on the way. It was summer, and most passengers were traveling for vacations and were supposed to get off in Athens. The flight's captain was a highly experienced man. At 59 years old, he had over 17,000 flying hours. The first officer was 51 and had spent more than 7,500 hours in the air. Usually in such accidents, the focus is on crew expertise, but this case was different. Both pilots had flown together several times before, and the first officer had often complained to friends and family about the captain's strict and pressuring behavior. The airline was already aware of this issue. Not only that, but the first officer's training record also revealed that he had trouble following checklist procedures, something that would later prove to be extremely crucial. The aircraft was a 7-year-old Boeing 737-300. In the cool morning air, it took off smoothly from Larnaca Airport. As soon as the plane climbed above 10,000 feet, the crew contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control, and the captain requested permission to fly at 34,000 feet, which was granted. But as soon as the plane reached 12,000 feet, suddenly an alarm began ringing in the cockpit. It was the same alarm that usually sounds on the ground before takeoff when there's a configuration issue. Both pilots were puzzled as to why it was sounding in mid-air. 90 seconds later, the captain contacted the airline's operations center and informed them about the takeoff configuration warning. He also mentioned that the ventilation cooling fan lights were off and asked where the circuit breakers were located. The engineer on the ground replied that those lights were supposed to be off anyway, and that the circuit breaker was behind the captain's seat. When the engineer asked the captain to confirm the issue, the captain said it was not off, an answer that confused the engineer. At that moment, the engineer remembered something. Before the flight, he had checked the plane's pressurization system because its controls were close to the ones the captain was confused about. The engineer then asked the captain whether the pressurization mode was set to auto or manual. But instead of answering, the captain repeated the same question about the circuit breakers. During this conversation, the passengers' oxygen masks had already dropped. Soon after, Helios ground operations lost all contact with the plane. The aircraft reached 34,000 feet, and all attempts to communicate with it failed. Helios operations then contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control and asked them to try contacting Flight 52. For the next 5 minutes, the controller kept trying but received no response. Then they contacted another nearby aircraft and asked its crew to try reaching Flight 52, but that failed too. Meanwhile, Flight 52 had entered Greek airspace without permission and continued following its flight plan. Nicosia Air Traffic Control tried to reach the flight on emergency frequencies as well, but still no response. They then contacted Athens ATC to check if they had made any contact with Flight 52, but unfortunately they hadn't either. At this point, there were two possibilities. Either there was a radio transmission issue, meaning the crew could hear but not reply, or the pilots had been taken hostage. Assuming the first possibility, Athens Control Tower granted the flight permission to descend, but there was no sign of descent from the aircraft. After more than 20 attempts to make contact failed, Athens ATC was forced to alert the Greek Air Force, reporting that Flight 52 had entered the airspace without permission and was not responding to any messages. The Greek Air Force immediately dispatched 2 F-16 jets to intercept it. By this time, Flight 52 was perfectly following its flight path on autopilot. The points where it was supposed to begin descent had already been missed twice, but it continued cruising at 34,000 feet. At 7:37 a.m., Flight 52 started circling above Athens Airport in a holding pattern. A circular path planes follow while waiting for landing clearance. When it was on its 6th loop, 2 F-16s intercepted it at exactly 8:30 a.m. One of the F-16 pilots gave a shocking report. The captain's seat in the cockpit was empty. He looked into the passenger cabin through the windows and could see that all passengers were motionless in their seats, with oxygen masks on their faces. When the plane made its 10th loop, one of the F-16 pilots noticed something strange. A man wearing a light blue shirt and a black vest entered the cockpit and sat in the captain's seat. He put on headphones and placed his hands on the control panel. The fighter pilot signaled to him and he waved back. But moments later, the plane's left engine shut down, causing it to tilt sharply to the left and start descending. Just before 9 a.m., the plane banked further left, and then its right engine also shut down. About 4 minutes later, it crashed into the mountains northwest of Athens and was completely destroyed. Investigators immediately began their work. They examined the wreckage and questioned the engineer who had performed maintenance on the plane the night before. The engineer had conducted a pressurization leak test, during which he had set the overhead panel's pressurization mode from auto to manual. But after completing the test, he forgot to switch it back to auto. As the plane flew at 34,000 feet, the cabin pressure began to drop because it was still in manual mode. In low pressure, the human brain can function for only about 10 minutes, a condition called hypoxia, meaning lack of oxygen. Its first effect is on the brain, causing confusion, impaired thinking, and eventually unconsciousness or death. The pilots were supposed to check this switch during their pre-flight duties, but they didn't, assuming it was already set to auto, as it normally was. They missed 2 other chances to notice it, before taxi and after takeoff. When the plane climbed above 12,000 feet, the cabin altitude warning alarm started ringing. But instead of realizing it was a pressurization problem, the pilots mistook it for the takeoff configuration warning and began following that procedure, completely ignoring the real issue. Meanwhile, the oxygen masks in the cabin deployed and the pass oxygen light illuminated. But due to the early effects of hypoxia, the pilots probably didn't notice this either. This was the moment when the captain and first officer lost consciousness, and after the 10-minute oxygen supply ran out, the passengers and crew also blacked out. Now the question remained, who was the man seen in the cockpit 2 hours later? Investigations revealed that he was a flight attendant named Andreas Prodromou, who held a commercial pilot's license but was not qualified to fly a Boeing 737. The cockpit voice recorder showed that Prodromou tried to make a mayday call after the engines failed, but forgot to press the transmit button. The investigation board concluded that his flying experience was not enough to control a Boeing 737, especially after both engines had failed due to fuel exhaustion. And even if he had somehow managed to land the plane, it was unlikely anyone on board would have survived, as prolonged hypoxia causes irreversible brain damage. During the wreckage examination, investigators found that 3 out of 4 portable oxygen cylinders had been used, confirming that Prodromou and possibly 2 other cabin crew members had used them, allowing them to remain conscious longer than the others. After the Helios Flight 52 disaster, the aviation industry learned valuable lessons and introduced new standard operating procedures, SOPs. Boeing was instructed to improve pilot training and to emphasize the difference between various warning alarms. Since these SOPs were implemented, a tragedy like Helios Flight 52 has never happened again. We hope you'll like and share this LearnSpear video. Thank you so much for your love and kind comments. See you in the next amazing video.